As we open up to our spiritual life, we often start having experiences that go outside the box of normal, quote, reality. And so in this episode, we're going to expand outside the boxes and have a great conversation about how Toltec wisdom can support us to also be with our loved ones. Diana Adkins is with us today. Diana is a Toltec minister and coach and teacher and an author, and she's one of my mentors from when I first began my journey. And so I'm so excited for you all to meet Diana. So join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show. Soul Nectar Show.
Well, hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Soul Nectar Show. This is Carrie Hummingbird. I am your guide for today's wondrous exploration beyond the veil to those realizations that would make our life so much easier if we just had that information. You know, we love to have these conversations on Soul Nectar Show. And I love Toltec wisdom. I got to tell you, it's my first basic foray, pretty much my first foray in my spiritual training when I woke up after my dark night of despair. And I decided that I didn't like that story anymore. Like if I was sitting in the movie theater watching my story of my life, I would get up and walk out like, this story sucks. And pretty soon I did walk out, and I walked out of my marriage of 15 years. I walked out of psychotherapy, which I'd been doing for 2 decades on a couch weekly. That wasn't working. Obviously, it didn't fix anything. So let's stop doing that. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to stop doing everything that's not working, because if I've done it for a number of years and it's still not working, I should just stop and try something else. And when I left, one of the first books that I was handed was The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I thought, why didn't anybody give me this book when I was like 2 years old and I could just start reading? I needed to read that immediately upon entering the earth realm. And I found it out, of course, on perfect timing. And then I read that book 40 times front to back to reprogram my brain, simultaneously studying with Heather Ashimara and this beautiful being that you guys are going to meet today, Diana Adkins. Diana is an amazing human, definitely supported me through the beginning part of my spiritual awakening to really deep wisdom about being a coach, being a mentor, being a healer. And I'm just so much gratitude for Diana being on the show. You're going to find out that she is amazing, traveled the world, barns to boardrooms, magic to monasteries, acts as a CEO, and acts in energy and courage, and everywhere in between, including the speed humps we hit along the way. And she's got a great passion and mission to support self-awareness, self-respect, integrity, and truth by expanding those boxes of our thoughts and beliefs, which are not always true. They're conditioning. And we learn that through the Toltec path, that we've been conditioned to think a certain way that keeps us small and safe, apparently, but not really, because we're suffering in that safety. And then we decide, I don't want to live this way anymore. Screw this. And we decide to change. And when we decide to change, all the doors open, and we find people like Diana, who's a minister and a coach and a teacher, who's also written her own book, Toltec Tools and Wisdom. And I love this one. I remember this one when it came out, how to potty train your brain. Is your idea about Diana's sense of humor. So welcome, Diana. Welcome to Soul Nectar Show. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to have fun.
Yeah, we are. So I know that you were telling me and stuff that I didn't ever know about you. Okay. So like this is news for me, you guys too, some of this stuff. But like you were saying, because I asked you, how did you even get started being a Toltec teacher? Like I know that I found you well in your path, as you had already been studying this for a long time. And then you were working with Heather Ash, and you guys were creating beautiful programs together. And I just was like, okay, Heather Ash introduced you. You're another expert. Cool. Let me learn from you. I had no idea. Like, I didn't ask any questions. I was just like instant expert to me. So how did you start being so open-minded? Like, what is your beginning? Like, how did you do that?
I love telling the story because it's so friggin' weird. So my dad wanted to be a minister and he wasn't. And so he got involved in back in the day, we're talking the 60s, it was called spiritualism. And so he met a woman who's my stepmom now, and she was a medium and a channeler, and her dad had this spiritualism little camp outside of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And my dad turned out, I mean, I don't know how you turn out like this, but he had a skill as an exorcist. And so they were just, dad had just gotten divorced it was like 4 years maybe after he gotten divorced. And I say I raised three kids and my dad, my brothers and sisters being the kids, but he got really involved in that. So we would have Ouija boards and pyramids and magic rocks under beds and stuff in the living room. We'd have seances in the living room. I used to bring friends to try to trip up the Louise, the medium, and then things would happen like they'd be away and I'd have a big party because I'm 16 and everybody's upstairs on my water bed and all of a sudden people are flooding out of the house screaming, "We're getting out of here!" And they said didn't happen in the rest of the house. All the lights had started flashing and weird stuff was going on. And so my dad would like leave. I mean, I remember one night I was terrified, literally terrified. And he said, "Oh, that was just Sister Mary Elizabeth." I asked her to hang out and I said, let you know she was here. I said, next time keep told her to shut up because I kept hearing all this knocking and banging on the walls and it really scared me. And so I then proceeded to run as far away as I could. I left North Carolina. I went across the country and basically I kept running until I couldn't run anymore. And I was in a place in Moscow, Idaho. I'd gotten married back to the land or, big farm and all that crap stuff. And it was really fun. I needed to learn it, but I'm lying in bed in Moscow, Idaho, and all of a sudden something wakes me up. And I look out the window and there's a street light out the window, but I can't see the street light because there's this big cloud of like blackness or something blocking it. And that scared me. And what I wrote in my journal at the time, I said, what's so remarkable was that scared me more than this guy sitting at the end of my bed. And I was like, it was like some angel or energies guide, whatever, but he made the blackness go away. Because I was convinced the Oogies, what I call them Oogies from my dad's house, had finally found me. And with that, when they went away, his basic message to me was, you got to quit running away from this stuff. Because the whole back to the lander, you're so darn busy, cows and hay and gardens, and it's all great but there's not much time for a lot else. And he basically was saying I'd been using that to run away. And so I started studying everything I could get my hands on energy work. Because if I learned one thing from, well, this time when I started learning it and the time at home with all this other stuff, was that energy is available for everybody and we all have access to it. So the quote bad guy, the Oogies, had just as much access as I did. What I saw the big difference was they had more skill. I was clueless, right? To a large extent. I mean, I was a Jesus freak as a teenager and all this other stuff. And we spoke in tongues and, we were that brand of Christianity, but the Jesus freaks, that's what they called us. So I was aware of some uses of energy, but I wasn't skilled and other stuff was skilled. So I pretty much got tired of being scared is what it really boils down to. And so I made a commitment. I studied everything I could get my hands on. Theosophical Society work, science of breath, pranayama yoga, all of that. And so I was studying those things. And then I went and I lived in Indonesia for a while. And, you go to these countries, they are so mystical if you are open. So I was helping people with the spirits because I kind of had a feel for some of that. And then I had my first poltergeist. Oh my God. I never had one before or since. Yeah, right. So the school I was teaching at, they rented a house for the teachers. And I had this little houseboy guy who worked at the school and they gave him a back room there. And I was teaching him English. And so we're sitting in the living room and I'm trying to teach him English. And all of a sudden we hear something fall over in the dish drainer, which I can actually see from where I was sitting. But we get up and don't think anything of it. And we go back and, a few minutes later, something else falls over in the dish drainer. And so his name was Toogie. being very superstitious. He gets up and he goes and looks. I'm curious. I go look, and we can't tell. There's nothing. Yeah, a big glass, has fallen over in the dish drainer. And I thought maybe it was one of the geckos because they live on the wall. You got house lizards and stuff like that, but I'd never seen one on a table or anything. So we go back and I'm teaching it, and then another glass falls over. This little guy, for an Indonesian, he turned as white as he could get. And he just terrified. He goes, I'm sure he was hiding under the bed, locks the door, leaves the lights on in his room. And I think, well, that's kind of interesting. And I don't think anything more of it. Like 2, 3, 4 days later, I'm walking in the back door. I'm carrying a load of clothes from that's another scene, how you had to wash them by hand. But anyway, and I go in and I still have this lid to this day, this little lid that they have to put on top of drinks so that bugs don't get in it. It lifts up out of the same dish drainer and flies about 3.5 feet, hits the side of the cupboard and falls on the ground. And I'm standing there holding my laundry going, okay, you've got my attention. And so I went in and I sat down, and some of this was just self-guided. I just really centered myself, and I had a conversation with the house spirits, because in Indonesia they have that. They have the black magic people, the white magic people, jinns, and earth spirits, and it's a very dynamic. It's very dynamic. Anyway, the house spirit, I said, look, you've just terrified this poor little Toogie dude. And I said, you please have to stop. And it was the coolest thing, because I got the sensation of like a little kid going, what? I can't play anymore. And it was just so cute. And so, but when I left there, so I had all this other kind of odd stuff. But then when I left Indonesia, I ended up finding an intentional spiritual community called the Lama Foundation here in New Mexico. And my life radically shifted. So I went from that kind of spiritual work to, at Lama, their belief is the motto is like towards the one. So they honor all spiritual traditions. So I basically say I can now pray in every religion in the world except for Baha'i. I didn't get to study that, but they accept, and they don't do Buddhism and stuff, but Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Sufism, the whole, all that. But when I left, I knew the biggest thing I walked away from, aside from praying everywhere, was that I wasn't a devotee. I'm not a devotee kind of person. And this was when Don Miguel, this was I left in 1999 or 2000. Miguel had come out with the 4 agreements, and he had a big retreat here in Santa Fe. And I went to that, met Heather Ash, and it was weird. Everybody we worked with, Carrie, in Texas, they were all there, and none of us knew each other. But they were all at that same retreat by Miguel. And that's when I started with Heather, but more with Raven. And I've become a Toltec everything. And I was able, that wasn't available to a whole lot of people. And I'm kind of sad in a sense, because we had much deeper practices that handfuls of us got to do around vastly deeper levels. But I got to teach the work with the spirit weavers and, spoon bidding and just the various things we did in that. And I've just kept going. And Heather Ash and I created Artists of the Spirit. But, my openness comes from, one, I love energy. And if you're into energy, then there's very little. I just had somebody practice their hypnosis on me. And she said, oh, I'm clearing AIs from you. And I'm like, dude, AIs? But according to her way of looking at stuff, I was cluttered up with some AI. So, But yeah. That's that story, or a dozen of those stories.
That's fascinating. Yeah, so it's got to be really interesting to have these physical worlds examples of spirit, of energy moving, right? Like invisible energy that we can't see, like most of us. Maybe some people can. I know there are some people that can see it, right? But like most of us can't necessarily see it with our eyes open. But we might be able to feel it or sense it. And then to have it like so dramatically, show up, like knocking on doors and knocking and then moving glass across the room. And that's shocking, and to us, because it's not part of our reality experience for most people, is that if it's alive and real, then we can see it, touch it, taste it, smell it. Right. And so when it's like invisible doing that, we don't know what to do with that information. A lot of us, right? That's news.
Mhm.
And, but that you weren't scared by it. Well, you were said you were scared when you were younger, but that you came to just accept it as energy, that this is just simply energy that's present. That
Well,
seems more neutral.
those were, so now I understand and, work with students around, there's a bunch of different kinds. It's not, you can say, yeah, it's all energy. I mean, Einstein, I love to quote Einstein, everything is energy and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want to attain. And, he's going, you have to get it. There's no other way because of the way that energy works. But then people flavor the energy. You, me, I mean, it's good, it's bad, it's neutral. It's, we've got all these, Toltecs call it domestication, early childhood development has impacted all of our beliefs and agreements about what the heck is real. And then we'll put on blinders and not see anything that doesn't fit. This is where the get out of your boxes part comes in. We literally put on blinders that says, I'm not going to see what Diana sees because that's not in my reality. Whereas everybody has the ability. It's just that we don't believe we can, or we should, or we're scared, or we're not even admitting that we're scared. But our 5-year-old made an agreement that the things under the bed and in the closet, oh my, and we're not going to we're going to run away from anything that scares us, essentially.
Yeah,
And
and then those of us who do start to wake up to this, right? We have that turning point where like you can't deny it anymore. The glass just went right across the room.
right.
And you were the only one there to witness it. So, you know, but you've
Oh, if
experienced.
if Tukey had seen that, he would have never walked in that house again. That I know.
Yeah. And so I feel like in that way, it's interesting because something like that happens to disrupt the way your reticular activating system is filtering out information. Like, because we learned about this in our training when I remember when we were learning about how our reticular activating system shows us the world we believe is there. We only see what we believe. And it's so funny because I think it's really funny during the last few years, during our world transition, how social media has actually reflected the reticular activating system because it only shows you what you believe in. It's confirmation bias, right? And so the engines themselves are programmed to only show you people on your feed that you agree with, right? And that's actually how the reticular activating system works. So it's kind of interesting how that social media is mirroring that. But when you have a breakthrough moment where, for some reason life randomly, maybe to get you out of that box, randomly throws something in your face that you can no longer deny now, then that helps you to break out of that conditioned way of seeing the world, right? It gives you an invitation to expand the way you're perceiving.
Well, firewalking does that too. I mean, and I don't recall, I can't remember. Did you get certified as a firewalker?
Yes. So I actually lead people across
Yeah,
the fire, which is really fun. You
yeah.
guys should do it.
Yeah, so that's people breaking the limits of their mind, what I say, and forgive my language, but I'll teach my students, like, our minds make shit up and call it real. It's not, but your mind's going to say you can't walk on fire. You, me, and hundreds and thousands of people have. I did notice just you might find it interesting. I went to a firewalker on Bali, and because I took my parents around the islands before I moved away, and those guys had to go into these deep trances because when he was done, he's like legs are splayed out in front of him, so calluses like an inch thick on the bottom of his feet. But I went up, he was not there. It's like the lights were kind of on, but there was nobody home, and I was yeah, totally different than how you do it, or we do it, yeah.
Yeah, we stay present for the experience.
Mhm.
And it's kind of interesting. Everybody does a fire walk the different way because we're all unique people. For me, I always open the sacred space and I invite spirit in consciously, and I do it out loud so everybody else knows that we're now inviting a different layer of reality to show up for us. And some people have taken videos of, no, not when we're walking, because we never want to do that while we're walking, but like when we first light the fire, some people have taken videos and captured like little spiritual energies like floating above the fire and like on video, which I thought was really cool that it showed up on video. And even like a picture of me with like a giant cat like over me, like this green cat like over me. They caught a picture of it, so it's kind of interesting how that can also show up on film, right? But most people would just not be able to ever know that that was there or happening. So the worlds are thinning, the veil is thinning, and we're getting these experiences like you had, which is kind of opening us up to question marks, right? Like, what is reality? What is real? How do we determine that?
There's so many sayings around reality being subjective. And I happen to believe that too, to an extent. I mean, I'm not going to say anything's cut in stone and it's only this way, but reality is subjective because, something that scares me won't scare you. Same exact thing. And, we've got several stories that we tell, but, one is of four women leaving a movie theater or something and seeing an event happen between a couple that they don't know, and all four women see the exact same event and walk away with completely radically different ideas of what they just saw. They even say, I've heard, it's probably urban myth, but that you could put like something in the middle of a stadium and you'll still get a completely different interpretation of a very simple thing in the middle of a stadium full of people. And so if that's true and it's real for every person, then reality in a sense, except for, gravity is real here, not on the moon or hovering in space, so it's subjective to a large degree. And yet a lot of philosophers will say, and I love the guys that say this, Paul Selig is one who's really pretty good. He said, reality is anything that's going to be true most of the time for everybody or all the time for everybody. But yet that's really hard to find. And because we are making it up, calling it real. So that's that person, it's real for them. It is their reality. And yet it might not be for anyone else.
And the shared reality that we all think is reality is actually just agreements. Like we all agreed that the sky is blue and the trees are green, in some way. We all agree that there's mountains and there's like a co-creative, if we go to the larger place, potential that we're all agreeing that that's so. I mean, let's just take that back to like the Western countries. In Western countries, if you're sick, the person to go to is the white coated person who's a doctor. That's correct in Western societies. But if you were in an indigenous village, you might go to the shaman. So you might go to the medicine woman. You might go to some completely other place, right, for a solution. So how we just make those choices, 90% of people in Western society would say you go to the doctor, right? But in another totally different place in the world, that's not the solution. So that is really interesting when you start to ask, like, what is reality? Because I think it's just what we all agreed it is. And different cultures around the world, you've traveled around so much, being exposed to different places, doesn't that help you expand your perception of what's real, like what reality is?
Everybody should travel. And that's one of my complaints about America, a lot of Americans, is they don't get the hell out of their country. Because it does, you said it well, it completely expands your horizons. And I remember thinking as I was going into Thailand back then, pointing your finger, oh, bad, 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 pointing your toe or your feet. So you couldn't like sit and point your feet at anything sacred. You can't point, there were so many things that were considered taboo. And then there's an imaginary line of the border of Thailand with Malaysia. It's just you cross some imaginary line, you're in a totally different world, Buddhist versus Muslim, and completely different things are taboo. It's just so fascinating to me to see. Or like in Mexico, I love Mexico, and they have more world, what do they call them, heritage sites that you can get in Mexico than anywhere in the world, any other country in the world. And even there, it's the same thing. Like you said, maybe you go to the medicine. Some people see, some people don't. I was seeing when I would go to the temples, Alberto was very tolerant with me because I kept finding stuff that couldn't be exactly explained. And I'd see these giants. He goes, "Oh, yeah, my grandmother talked to me about the giants." He goes, "I haven't seen them, but it sounds like you have." And I'm like, well, shoot, rather, his grandma was gone. I wanted somebody else to talk with me about what I was seeing. And I think only because if you open all of your senses up, that's I think the thing with people. They'll say I'll see it if I believe it, or believe it when I see it. Um, and we don't use all of our senses because that's how any of this happens. It's like it's not to me, there's no magic to this. It's not some woo-woo thing that I can do and you can't do. And I know Carrie can do all of it, but people don't, nobody's told them, hey, you have permission, because one, they think they'll be ostracized. Two, nobody's going to believe them. Three, they're going to somebody will think they're crazy, okay. So,
And I think because of that fear of the unknown, the unseen for the most people, and then this idea that it's scary, wrong, or bad, or whatever. And then the people that can see it or perceive it then don't want to say anything. It's like closet psychic. It's like, I don't want to say anything because then they're going to lock me up. They're going to say I'm schizophrenic because I could see some dark stuff and I could hear some voices. And now all of a sudden I'm psychotic. But like, is that really psychosis, or is that like you're psychic and you can see and perceive things that aren't in this dimension of reality that we co-created and all agreed on? You're just able to widen your perception to include things that the majority aren't perceiving, but that doesn't make you crazy. It just makes you more perceptive.
no, I think personally, I think it's the intent that makes, because it is both. There are people that do those things that have chemical, what do they call it, bad chemicals. Kurt Vonnegut, one of his books, they've got odd chemicals going on in their systems. Part of discernment with part of, for me, what I teach with discernment is that if you look at something and it's not asking to hurt anybody else, it's not trying to hurt you, you never barter with anything you got. I mean, how do people have spirit guides? I mean, let's get real, all right? I use the Archangel Michael. I use Quetzalcoatl. When I do healing work with people, other people pray to angels. What do they think they're doing? And so I think if people were to actually dissect what they're actually doing, then they're going to see that they're actually already doing it. They just never put it in the right context. So the biggest and best example for picking up energy is when you feel like somebody's watching you from behind. Your spidey sense is kicking in. I mean, what the hell do you think is going on? They're not touching you, but you're feeling them behind you or around you. That's exactly the same thing. That's the energy that's working, and some of it might not be friendly, and some of it might just be your kid sneaking up to surprise you, or a friend or boyfriend or partner or something like that. And so people are doing it all. It's just, and I think to discern, you have to figure out what feels right, because there are energies out there that, oh, I don't know. I don't like to say evil because I don't like that word, but that are not necessarily helpful. And there are people out there that are wigged out, that are not helpful. And people like that can send really, really heavy energy. And so how do you know when you're going to work with anybody? You meet some person that feels all light and fun. Okay, you work with them. You meet somebody that's like, oh, gee, you don't work with them. It same works with all of it. It's not any different. It's just you have to learn to pay attention to your heart or your head. And one of the things I pause because I think that what I teach my students is that the big way to tell the difference between your highest and your gut versus your head and your fears and stuff is that when it's your mind or your fears, they are loud, they're annoying, they're insistent. Our mind, our fears, all of that is very loud. And the voice of spirit is very, very calm and quiet. And that's actually one of the best ways to tell. And the voice of spirit, it's not going to harp on you. It's not usually, it might go a couple of times, but that nagging voice in your head never stops, right? That's not, that's not your highest. It's not spirit. It's not your intuition. The intuition is that small, quiet voice. And damn, I know for me, I have to watch it because it sometimes only speaks once. If I'm not paying attention, I miss it.
Yeah, if we're too loud, if we have a rock concert going on in our heads, it's really hard to hear it. But that's where we want to learn about the metote, right? Like that's where understanding why do we have the rock concert going on, right? Is all the voices, all the voices in our heads. And I think it was when I started studying the Toltec, the deeper I go, it's like, oh, like when I realized that I was created the narrator voice in my head in school, when they told me to read in my mind the story, right? And to read it out loud in my mind, actually created the narrator in my mind.
Really?
So, yeah, like when you read a story, you could read it out loud at first to understand it, but then you start reading it without moving your lips. They invite you to read it inside you. You're still reading it with a voice, but it's inside. That's creating a voice. That's creating your narrator voice. And then if you forget that they taught you that in, grade school, at some point because that voice just keeps going, right? And it narrates everything. So then you think that's you, but it's actually not you. You're not narrating your life experience to yourself. It's just simply a narrator that you created when you were a kid and super imaginative and you had to read the story to yourself. So like I wonder what it would be like if our minds were just quiet. We could probably hear spirit a lot better if we weren't so busy.
Well, that's part of I think, the process. Because, kids are domesticated way before they ever can read. I remember a 2-year-old running around nonverbal, just going, whoa, 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 whoa. And I said, Kathy, what's she saying? She goes, I think she's saying no, And then Kathy was like, yeah, and I think I better be careful of how much I'm saying no to her. Because this gorgeous little toddler could barely walk, was just going, whoa, 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 whoa. And, to me, that's really a clear example of how we start those same voices because she'd heard it enough. So it starts, but I think that's part of it well, I have my personal feeling is that we come into this life in a situation that's perfect for us to get over. It's like we got to get over it or learn more accurately would be learn through it, because how does any of it happen to any of us? People in the same family are going to come out. All my four of us and we're all vastly different, raised in theory, and not in theory, but in the same family. I had a friend once, she said, I should have a boy and a girl. And she goes, I tried to raise them exactly the same, but Emo will be out in the backyard, strangling the puppy. And the daughter's in there playing with tea sets kind of thing. And she said, and I tried to raise them exactly the same. And so we come out with a whole set of unique things that are us. Because like for me, I don't know that I ever heard the story and I'm older than you. So they changed up how they teach. And yet the effects are the same. We end up with the voices in our head. Jenny Gentry would call them our people. The mitote is the 10,000 voices. The Toltec through the parasite, it's the judge, the victim in our book of law or our rules, all of which were taught to us by people with their own filters. And so, it's the human. I say to people, I said, you could be raised by wolves and you have been domesticated. It's not possible not to be. And so part, I think, of the growth process is getting over that, working through it, understanding I learned a voice to keep me safe. Because most of the things that happen were to keep us safe. And they worked when we were 5, right? Aren't working so well at 25, 35, and 55. And that's where we have to realize that we picked it up, but we didn't put it down when it had served its usefulness. And
Yeah,
then
and it's there to keep us safe and to keep us company, right? Like to have in your little crib at night and you have this little voice that comes in, or in your bed, you have a little voice that comes in, and I often wonder, like, I remember just really brief moments where I saw energies like that weren't actually in the space and relayed those to my mom. And she was like, that's not really there, but I swear I saw a leprechaun in the corner of my room, in the ceiling, right? But we get told it's not real. We get told that's not true because the adults aren't perceiving it. So, like that, you grew up in a different household where everyone's like, yeah, there's spiritual energy and there's all kinds of stuff all over the place. And we even like perform exorcisms on it, so you had a different environment where it made that normal, like part of
Oh,
it,
not normal.
not normal for
Yeah.
society, but like normal in your house. Like, yeah, there's stuff all over the place that's, that's here and alive. Do you think it kind of wakes it up, because whatever we put our attention on grows, right? And so do you think the fact that your parents were open to that and aware of that also encouraged maybe the attraction of those kind of energies or expression by those energies because they're being witnessed and it's like
Yeah, I'm
going to
the only
grow?
one out of all three other kids were exposed to the same thing. And my stepbrother was Louise, the medium, the channeler. Um, they eventually married, so then it's five of us. I'm the only one that turned out this way. I'm the only one. The rest of them are all mainstream. Yeah, I won't even get into the politics and religion and all that. But we are all so dramatically different, and yet we were raised with the same stuff.
Wow. Same stuff going on, same kind of experiences. Stuff goes bump in the night and you end up exploring it all and they're not. That's
I
interesting.
think I was older, and so,
Hmm.
but and so part of it I was paying more paying attention to. But it's got, I don't know, it depends on how much you want to give to astrology, for example. With astrology, oh hell yeah, of course I'm going to. With my chart and the whole lineups and everything. It's my whole life is spirituality. None of the rest of them have that. So, it's sort of, it gets complicated, but let's just say that we're all different, and I'm the only one. I was the black sheep of the family. Put quotes around that. The one they admired all, I'm the only one that would get up and go travel as a single woman around the planet, when I was very young yeah, no, they're all very straight.
So how do you like, I know a lot of other people that watch my podcast feel that they are also what I like to call the rainbow sheep, just to be sweet.
I like that.
Yeah. So, us rainbow sheep sometimes feel not really sure how to interact with people that don't maybe see things the way we do, right? But part of the mainstream, as you said, like part of that group consciousness. And somehow we're able to perceive something different than what's being agreed upon by the collective. And we're able to see in a different way that's not typical up until now, although I think it's getting more typical. How do you deal with that? Like how do you have self-respect? Because one thing I notice is that sometimes in my experience, when I started awakening these things within myself, people in my family system were not incredibly receptive to what I was perceiving and not really receptive to the perspectives I was sharing. And and for a little while that felt a little bit like toxic energy to me. Like they're so toxic. I don't want to be around them. And I hear a lot of spiritual people saying that. That's why I'm bringing this up. I think it was just my own discomfort with being different. But what's your sense of that?
Real simple. When in Rome, do as the Romans. I mean, I'm going to be frank and bloody frank honest. It's like if you don't have a big enough ego, that means you have to have everybody be all up in your stuff. They don't have to know what I'm doing. They don't, I mean, now walking in my house, there's a big Kuan Yin you can't see there, another one, there's statues and spiritual stuff everywhere, drums, ravens, the whole, all my shaman shits and I mean, it's just like there's stuff everywhere. That gets on, but you know what I've noticed? They don't, if I don't call attention to it, which I don't say anything. They don't even look. They don't even notice. They don't go. You would be love my altars. They won't even go over there and look. So I don't care. They're going to have, I mean, but really and truly, we're knocking ourselves, I mean, our heads against a wall if we think that all these other people should understand us, because and it's not even that that they might not want to, it's they have no framework. They don't like, everybody before they have an awakening had no framework for what they're awakening to. And so it's really kind of hypocritical for us to go off on all these other people that aren't getting us when the truth is we wouldn't have gotten us. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten, well, I would have, but don't mean that egotistically either. I just had a weird life. But, people, they don't understand. They've had a breakthrough, but the rest of the world didn't. And so it's really defeating for us to try to share with people that are not, I mean, if they're not going to receive what you're putting down, then shouldn't put it down. It's like my parents. So the exorcist and the medium channeler, they became devout, born again Christians. If you know what that means, they proselytize, they do the whole thing. They went and joined a group that sent missionaries, right, out. So they were like dyed in the wool. I could still talk to them about a lot of what I did. I just used different language, or you have come to an agreement. They felt I was going to hell. I said, okay, I know I'm not. So let's just not talk about that. And it works out fine. But the truth is, it's about our own ego that we feel they have to understand us. Whereas if I put my understanding forward first, if I understand they haven't had their mind expanded, if I understand their background doesn't allow for them to have a framework to even grok what I'm saying, then I'm not going to even try. I'm going to go find other people. And I think this is where a lot of spiritual people are challenged, is because they want their bestie to get it. Well, their bestie might be tolerant, and some people will be tolerant even though they don't agree. And so you have to be okay to agree to disagree, and then you just drop that and have the love, as opposed to having to have everybody, do it your way. I mean, really. And then you can find people that you can talk to. That's where, and community potentially, but there's meetups, there's so much now around that you don't even have to be physically present, because there are places. I have students in towns in the world, nobody. I've had clients like that. They kept me I had a guy for 9 years because he had nobody, including his wife, where he lived that could talk to about this kind of wild stuff. So it's maybe not what you want, but if you can understand it is what it is, and then open your own eyes up to look for the people that will be more tolerant and understanding and curious and appreciative.
Yeah, I saw this meme on Instagram that said, if you're still trying to wake people up, you're the one who's asleep.
Oh, I
And
love that.
and I say that on myself too for many years, up until that realization a couple of years ago. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't really it's kind of like, it's a lot of respect comes from the inside. Respect for my journey is my job, not somebody else's job to respect me and to even understand me. Like, that's my job, to understand myself. And I love how, with that awareness, like when we get to that level of awareness, I love how you shared that it's really like, if you're awake, it's your job to translate. Like if you're really awake, then you don't try to wake other people up. You just translate. It's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. It's okay. Don't worry about me. I'm safe, and in a way that they would understand. But, being the demonstration of it is actually what is more powerful, I feel like.
Exactly. Yeah, living by example. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's powerful because I remember Heather Ash had us do this exercise at the mall. This is how I came to this realization, Diana, is because my dad had this rare form of leukemia. And we're going to be wrapping up in just a couple of minutes, you guys. So my dad had this rare form of leukemia, and I was in energy medicine school. So I was ready to teach him how my grandma had just died, and she died from the same rare form of leukemia. So my brain went, yeah, she's attached to you, Dad. Like, you didn't go to her deathbed. And so she came to you, and she's attached to your field, and we need to get her off of there. It was very clear to me what needed to happen, but he thought that sounded like crazy gobbledygook, so he was like, I'm going to go to the cancer center, and that's how I'm going to do it. And he was very stuck on that. And I was really upset he wasn't listening to me. And I got offended that he wasn't listening to me. Meanwhile, he's the one with the disease. Like, his life is being threatened, and I'm upset with him because he won't listen. So anyway, we went through this exercise and I finally got it. I saw that I had been spiritually awakening to my own awakening, but then judging everybody else for being asleep, but then not still being asleep. And when I went to his house later that night after the exercise and I just sat and listened, it was like 30 minutes and he goes, I noticed that you haven't said anything. I said, I'm just here for you. He's like, you know what? I like this change in you because, this is my life. And in my life, you need to follow.
Mm.
That was really powerful for me. So this Toltec wisdom is what got me to that realization, and it healed my relationship. I got to be there for my dad, and he did not die from that. He lived another 5-6 years, but yeah, it's powerful. It can heal families. It can heal us when we let it.
Well, and understand things are changing because that born again dad would spout off that yoga will kill you, was bad for you, but and of the devil and all that. And then 5 or 6 years later, he has a heart diagnosis. They're trying to get him to do yoga. And I see yoga things on his tape for exercises. And I say, wait a minute, aren't you going, what are you doing with that devil stuff? He goes, no, 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 that's just yoga. That's for my heart. That's okay. All
It's
right,
healthy for me.
whatever works, and that's the thing we got to understand. They may not hear it from you, but they might hear it from somebody else as well. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of. The people closest to us, they're the easiest for us to argue with because we think they're safe. But what they may not be able to hear from you, they will hear or can hear from somebody else in some other way too. That's why there's so many teachers. I mean, there's a lot of Toltec teachers, but we all present it differently. There's a million shamans, they all present it differently. And so there's people out there that may have an inroad where, you don't.
Yeah, and patience. It's a good practice in mastery of patience, isn't it? And non-judgment. All the good stuff that we came here to learn. Woo! So, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up the episode? I know I'm gonna share your website, artistofthespirit.org. I know you still are teaching a class, and then you got a freedom bundle, 4 tools to hone awareness and dig a bit deeper into you. Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we close out?
Yeah, it's I was trying to feel into how people work with this stuff. So the first one is the effect of stress and like the warning signs. So just get a grip. Like at least look at it, right? It's a little handout picture thing to understand where you are with stress and some of the warning signs. And then there's the top 10 cognitive distortions. And we got to get it. Cognitive meaning how we think about things and some of the distortions that we all have. And so then it's the 37 questions to kind of get you unstuck and to start liberating you. And so this is asking you to go, a little deeper into yourself. But like I've said at one point, you can't change what you can't see. And good Lord, you got to turn towards it and look. And if you do that, if you'll look and explore it yourself, that's where the juice is. That's where it gets so exciting. And I also put in a bonus piece there about mind mapping the details. So if you go through these three things plus the mind mapping and really mind map out like your issues or different things, you're going to get them where you can see them. And as soon as you can see them, now you can start to change them. That's the juice of it.
I love that. I want to download it. I'm going to go get it. Sounds good. There's a link. I'll send it to you guys in the show notes down below. You'll have the link to go grab that from Diana. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show. And it's been great sharing space with you again. I've missed you. And it's just so good to see you.
Yeah, and I didn't think we talked this long.
I know, right? It goes forever. So
Right.
we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to do that by blowing kisses. So join me for kisses if you want. We're going to give everybody kisses.
There you go.
Oh, I love you guys. And we'll see you next week on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now, everyone. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken can't wait to show. Take a sip from the drip of the nectar, from the source of who you are. Yeah, yeah.